Save the Children says more than 700,000 Rohingya children are facing severe discrimination and denial of their most basic rights because of their statelessness in the countries they have fled to. Nearly 4 years after much of the Rohingya population was driven out of Myanmar by the military, the charity warns the children are vulnerable to sexual abuse, trafficking and forced labour. Well, let's talk to our Southeast Asia correspondent, Jonathan Head. Jonathan, I've been reading some of what Save the Children have had to say, and it's pretty harrowing reading. Many thousands of these children, just the basics, they're not getting at all.
No, and I think the attempt by Save the Children is to try to bring some attention back. Remember, it's almost 4 years since that shocking exodus of Rohingyas when huge numbers, 700,000, were driven out of Myanmar in the most appalling conditions and violence. And there was a great deal of international commitment then to try to look after them, to try to fix what was wrong. Now, there are all sorts of reasons why that hasn't happened. The obvious one is that the conditions have not been right for them to come back to Myanmar. They're a whole lot worse now because the very military which drove them out, saying they don't belong and killing and raping so many of them, is now running the country. But the other problem is that where they settled in Bangladesh, there was a great deal of praise for Bangladesh, and still is, for accommodating so many, more than 1 million Rohingyas. But Bangladesh wants to emphasize that they must go back to Myanmar, even if they can't. And for those reasons, it's kept them confined to these dreadfully overcrowded camps in the south, and it's transferring increasing numbers to a very remote, almost prison-like island in the Bay of Bengal. And in those camps, although there's a lot of aid agency work going on, there just aren't the facilities, the ability to give children any kind of normal environment. Now, that includes, obviously, education. And it's not just in Bangladesh. Where Rohingyas have fled to other countries, like particularly Malaysia, where they choose to go, they're still stateless, they have no status, they're not entitled to education there either. So you've got entire generations of children getting very little education or none at all. And, in the camps, inevitably, because of those conditions, you're having them, criminal gangs running rife. The children are victims of those. As you mentioned, trafficking, sexual abuse, just constant insecurity, fear they might be deported, fear they could be exploited. I think there is real concern you're going to have an entire generation of children who have literally no future at all unless there's a greater international interest. Interest has really waned quite a lot in the Rohingya crisis, but the conditions for them, if anything, are worse.
Yeah, as you say, the conditions are absolutely appalling, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of children who are of an age where they should be in school, and the numbers rising since the military coup in Myanmar.
Well, the situation in Myanmar is, of course, dreadful. The only plus side, I would say, or the bright side there, it's a very small one, a distant one, is that attitudes inside Myanmar among a lot of people who are very hostile to the Rohingyas, and in many cases the public supported that very brutal campaign against them, that has changed. As more and more Burmese have resisted the military and seen how appallingly they're treated, they're beginning to realise that the same was done to the Rohingyas, that the Rohingyas are victims like them. And we're seeing more and more opposition politicians saying that if we manage to overthrow the military, if we can rebuild a better democracy in Myanmar, it must include ethnic minorities like the Rohingyas. But of course, at this stage, there is no political movement in Myanmar. There's no sign that the military will loosen its grip. So a change of attitudes is welcome. But the plight of so many Rohingyas stuck in total statelessness in countries in the region hasn't changed and probably won't change without a much more committed international effort.
OK, for now, thank you. Jonathan Head, our Southeast Asia correspondent, with that story. Now, we are off to the races. The 5-day Royal Ascot meeting got underway on Tuesday with its usual blend of horse racing and high fashion. It's normally one of Europe's busiest meetings, with up to 70,000 people attending on some days, including, of course, the Queen. Well, last year there were no crowds at all, as the races had to be run behind closed doors because of the pandemic. This year's Ascot is being allowed up to 12,000 spectators a day as part of the government's pilot scheme to reintroduce live sporting events. The Queen has opted not to attend this year, so is this enough to rebuild its battered finances? Well, let's talk this through with Felicity Barnard, who's Commercial Director of Ascot Racecourse. Good morning, Felicity. First of all, what changes then have you made to the event this year?
Good morning. Yes, quite a few. It is going to look a little bit different in the last few days. Although the atmosphere has been fantastic, it is a smaller mini Royal Ascot as opposed to other years. So this year we're using many of the rules and regulations from the Events Research Programme to make the event as safe as possible for our racegoers and also our horsemen that join us. And that includes a very robust ticketing infrastructure, as well as a testing program. So all of the guests had to complete consent in order to come on site, and also a lot manner of testing. So lateral flow tests and PTR tests were a requirement before attending site. When you're actually on site, the difference for our event, as opposed to some others that have been part of the Events Research Programme, is that
about the experience, isn't it, Ascot? It's about the outfits, it's about the glamour, it's about the Queen being there as well as other royals. So how can you replicate that? You've mentioned they haven't got to wear masks, they don't have to social distance, but there's a lot fewer people there this year. It isn't the same, is it?
No, absolutely. It does feel very different. Although, fabulous weather we've had the last couple of days. I think today may be slightly different. It does certainly feel like a summer party. And we've got lots of installations, as you would expect from Royal Ascot. So lots of floral installations, lots of lovely activations around the site for our guests to enjoy. But yes, it does feel very different. But we've managed to keep, I think...
Quickly, Emily, though, how has this impacted you all overall at Ascot? Last year, no one there. This year, much fewer people. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the money coming in that counts.
Absolutely,
very briefly.
Yes. And undoubtedly, it has affected not only just the Royal meeting, but throughout the year. You know, there's been limited racing for us. So our business plan has probably been set back 3 to 4 years, our long-term plan. So yes, it absolutely has affected us. But to have racegoers back, as you can imagine, it does make a big difference to the bottom line too. So we are receiving some revenue. Our partners are happy. Our sponsors are happy. Our broadcast partners are also happy as well. So it's yes, it's by no means the same.
All right.
But of course we are feeling losses like so many.
Okay,
events.
Felicity, we've got to end it there. But thank you for getting up so early to talk to us about how things are going at Ascot. I'll see you soon.
In my red, got about 6 more rows.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to Thursday on BBC One, and this is Breakfast.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Chetty and Charlie State.
Wonderful night for Wales. They're on the verge of the Euro 2020 knockout phase now after a convincing win over Turkey in Baku.
Good morning. Last night we saw some heavy thundery downpours, particularly so across Kent. There's more thunderstorms in the forecast today across parts of England where it will remain humid in the southeast. The best of the dry and sunny conditions will be in the north and the west. I'll have all the details coming up.